first 2 hours, the flight from New York to Denver felt like any ordinary journey. Passengers settled into their seats. The cabin lights were warm and steady, and the gentle vibration of the engines created a peaceful rhythm. A few children played with tablets, business travelers typed quietly on laptops, and families whispered softly as the plane glided smoothly through the clouds. Everything suggested a calm, forgettable trip, the kind no one would remember the next day. But fate had other plans. Without warning, the aircraft jolted hard, as if an invisible hand had shaken it from the outside. Drinks flew, a few bags slipped from overhead bins, and frightened gasps rose instantly. Before anyone could understand what was happening, the plane dropped several feet in a sudden plunge that threw stomachs into throats. Oxygen masks fell with a clatter, swinging above trembling heads. The once steady lights flickered violently, casting the cabin into flashes of brightness and shadow like a heartbeat losing its rhythm. Screams erupted. A mother clutched her child. A businessman whispered a prayer under his breath. Even the flight attendants, trained for emergencies, looked pale and shaken as they rushed down the aisle, trying to calm those who were crying uncontrollably. Then the speakers crackled once, twice before the captain's voice came through. But it wasn't the calm, routine tone passengers were used to. It trembled slightly, carrying a truth no one was ready to hear. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, breathing heavily between words, "please prepare for a crash landing." The words echoed in the cabin like a death sentence. People turned to each other in disbelief, some sobbing openly, others frozen by fear. A few started recording messages to loved ones, their hands shaking with dread. The terror spread like wildfire, impossible to contain. In seat 14C sat a quiet, weather-worn farmer named Ethan Miller. He had small, tired eyes and hands that told stories of years spent under the sun. He wasn't a man who talked much, and no one around him knew who he was. But as the panic built around him, Ethan didn't scream. He listened. He watched, and when the engine made a certain uneven, choking sound, he recognized it not from an airplane, but from the old crop duster he had flown over countless fields back home. Slowly he unbuckled his seatbelt. People shouted at him to sit down, but Ethan had already made a decision. He stood up. The plane needed him. Ethan steadied himself as the plane shook violently, gripping the backs of seats while moving toward the front. Every few steps, turbulence threw him sideways, but he refused to stop. Passengers yelled at him, some begging him to sit down, others too terrified to understand why a simple farmer was walking toward the cockpit during a crisis. But Ethan's expression didn't change. His jaw was set, and his eyes were focused, as if he'd already accepted that this was something he needed to do. A flight attendant rushed toward him, panic in her voice. "Sir, you can't be up. Please sit down. We're landing." Ethan placed a firm, steady hand on her shoulder. "Ma'am," he said softly but with unshakable certainty, "if I don't get to the cockpit right now, we won't be landing at all." Something in his voice froze her. Not fear, not desperation, just calm truth. After a moment of hesitation, she stepped aside. Ethan pushed forward until he reached the cockpit door, which was vibrating slightly from the turbulence. He knocked once, but when there was no response, he pushed it open. Inside, chaos swallowed the small space. Warning alarms blared angrily. Red lights flashed across the control panels. One engine indicator had flatlined completely, and the other flickered like it was seconds from failure. Captain Reynolds clutched the controls with white knuckles. Sweat streamed down his face. The co-pilot fumbled through emergency procedures, flipping switches that did nothing. Their breaths were sharp, panicked. They had trained for disasters, but nothing looked like it was working. The moment Ethan stepped in, both pilots snapped toward him. "You can't be here," the captain shouted. "I know," Ethan replied, raising his hands, "but I can." The co-pilot's jaw dropped. "Help? Are you a licensed pilot?" Ethan shook his head. "Not exactly, but I've flown crop dusters since I was 15. Broken engines, rough landings, dead controls. I've been through them all, and I survived emergency landings no one believes should have worked." "Yeah." The cockpit went silent except for the alarms. Captain Reynolds searched Ethan's face for any sign of hesitation, any clue that he was bluffing. There was none. "Yeah." Another violent shudder rocked the plane. Altitude dropped rapidly. The captain swallowed hard. In a moment that defied every rule he'd ever followed, he stepped aside from the main controls. "Oh, right," he said quietly. "Show me what you can do." The fate of every soul on that plane now rested in the hands of a farmer. Ethan's hands closed around the controls with a surprising steadiness, as if he had been preparing for this moment his whole life. Captain Reynolds and the co-pilot exchanged uncertain glances, but neither interfered. The plane was already losing altitude too quickly, dipping lower with every passing second. Outside the cockpit windows, clouds tore past in sharp streaks, revealing glimpses of rugged land below. Ethan scanned the controls, absorbing everything in seconds. "We're not making it to Denver," he muttered. "Engines are done." The captain swallowed. "Nearest runway is 27 miles south. We'll never reach it." "I know," Ethan said, "which is why we're not going there." The co-pilot blinked. "Then what's the plan?" Ethan pointed toward the landscape visible through the windshield. A wide, uneven stretch of open land lay between two ridges, brown, rough, but long enough to attempt something insane. "That field," Ethan said. "It's not perfect, but it's better than the mountains around it." "You want to land a commercial jet in a field?" the captain asked in disbelief. Ethan nodded once. "Unless you want to try gliding into the side of a hill," that ended the argument. He straightened the yoke, fighting the shaking plane as it groaned under its own weight. The alarm screamed, almost drowning out his voice. Ethan leaned forward, adjusting the pitch with expert instinct. "I need full cooperation," he said. "Flaps down slowly. Keep the left wing stable, and don't fight the drift. Let her lean." The pilots followed his instructions, though their hands trembled. Ethan breathed deeply, the same way he had before landing crop dusters on narrow farm strips. But this time, 190 people depended on him. In the cabin, passengers cried, prayed, held hands, and braced themselves as the ground rose dangerously fast. Every bump of turbulence shook screams loose. Some shouted loved ones' names. Others whispered final goodbyes. Ethan kept his voice steady. "Easy, easy now." The plane dropped lower, skimming the tops of brush and tall grass. The landing gear groaned as it extended, one wheel juddering unevenly. Ethan tightened his grip. "Brace," he shouted. The first impact hit like an explosion. The plane bounced, dirt flying in massive clouds. The fuselage rattled violently. Overhead bins burst open. People were thrown forward, screams echoing through the cabin. The plane slammed down again, skidding across the rough ground, tearing through soil and brush. Ethan gritted his teeth, wrestling the controls. Another jolt, another bounce, and then a long shuddering slide, until finally, silence. They had landed, alive. For a long moment after the plane slid to a halt, no one moved. The world seemed to freeze around the silent aircraft resting crookedly in the middle of the rough field. Dust drifted lazily through the air like smoke after a battle. Inside the cabin, people slowly lifted their heads, trembling as they realized the impossible had happened. They were alive. A businessman who moments earlier had recorded a goodbye message now deleted it with shaking hands. Two strangers hugged as if they'd known each other for years. Gratitude, disbelief, and shock filled the air like electricity. The flight attendants, still shaking, rushed into action, opening exits, and guiding passengers out into the daylight. Some walked barefoot, some limped, some fell to their knees the moment they touched the ground, but every single one stepped out alive. Reporters, emergency workers, fire crews, and paramedics arrived minutes later, expecting carnage. Instead, they saw a battered plane in a field, and a line of passengers hugging, crying and thanking fate for sparing them. But amid all the chaos, one man was missing. Ethan Miller. While others celebrated their second chance at life, he quietly slipped through the emergency exit at the back. His boots hit the dirt softly, leaving faint footprints as he walked toward the distant tree line. No crowd, no applause, no cameras. He didn't want any of it. Captain Reynolds spotted him first. He jogged after him, still breathless, and called out, "Ethan, wait." Ethan stopped and turned, dust settling around him. The captain approached, still shaken from the near disaster. "You saved us," he said, voice cracking. "Every passenger owes their life to you. At least let us honor you. Where I come from, when something breaks, you fix it. When trouble comes, you face it. And when people need help, you don't wait for someone else to step up." The captain extended his hand, emotion in his eyes. "You're a hero, Ethan." Ethan took the handshake but smiled softly. "No, sir. I'm just a farmer who knows how to land a stubborn machine." With that, he tipped his head politely, turned, and continued walking, leaving behind a story the world would never forget, but he would never tell it himself.